Hello, everybody, and welcome. We'll just give everybody a minute or two to filter in here. If you want to pop in the chat where you're calling in from, I always love to know what the weather's like where you are. So tell me what the weather's like. And yeah, maybe if you want to share a little about what your winter feeding strategies are, what you're curious about, you can pop that in the chat too. And we'll get going in just like one more minute here. All right. I should have prepared a joke or something. I
I
have
know.
like a
You need to 30
45
seconds to stand
seconds.
up to be ready for holding on.
A tight 30 seconds. That's about all I should really be trusted with anyway.
Yeah. All right, well, let's let them trickle in and we'll get started. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to our panel, Beyond Bale Grazing, Optimizing Dormant Season Supplemental Feeding for Livestock Performance in Soil Health. Um, we have just a couple of housekeeping things before we introduce our panelists and get started. Beth is going to throw some community agreements in the chat. Pretty logical stuff. Just everybody be cool. But you give those a look if you want. Couple of things. We have a couple of upcoming virtual courses this fall. Andrea Malmberg is going to be teaching a 4-week holistic policy design class. That is like one of the lesser understood, lesser taught aspects of holistic management. And Andrea is a wizard at it. And it's, given the current state of the world, probably a really good thing for all of us to be thinking about. Beth's also gonna throw the link to our website where you can learn more info about the classes. We've also got a 4-week financial planning class that begins the 30th of October, a foundations in holistic management class that begins the 9th. And we have a self-paced holistic management foundations class available through the UVI Hub, which is our course learning and social page that is always available. And you can sign up to our newsletter to find out about everything new we've got going on. We're actually just in the process of releasing a replay package where you can, if let's say you're going for your savory accreditation and you just need land planning and no one's offering it until the spring, you can watch the replay and have some guidance from one of our guild members as you go through that. And we'll be releasing info about that in the coming weeks. So feel free to sign up for the newsletter if that sounds like something interesting to you. Um, we've also got some in-person classes coming up. If you want to come hang with Beth and I at the Lazy R. Coming up pretty quick is June 16th through the 20th. We will be teaching an introduction to holistic management, a holistic planned grazing and ecological monitoring course. Dora Cohen, who's on this call, is also going to be one of the instructors on that. She is a monitoring wizard. And if you want to get deep in the language of the land, planning both your dormant and growing season grazing and just, hanging out around the campfire with us, that's a good option this summer. And then in the fall, also at the Lazy R, we will be doing the Intro to Holistic Management, Holistic Financial, and Land Planning. So feel free to join us for any of that. And then the last thing we got coming up, we got a July webinar. This probably will also be a panel style. We're going to talk about our equine friends. A big misconception, sort of paradigm, even amongst holistic managers, that horses are always bad for grasslands. They're always bad for pasture. If you're going to have horses, you have to have a sacrifice area. And Beth and I are going to find some folks, and we've already been talking to some really cool people, who are breaking that paradigm, shifting that paradigm, and seeing horses as just another partner in ecosystem health. So feel free to join us for that in July, and Beth's going to throw the link to sign up for that webinar in the chat.
All
And
right, Katie,
yeah.
you powered through that. That was amazing. Uh, all right, I'm Beth Robinette. I also work at UVI. Katie and I head up the Learning and Practice Enterprise. And it is my delight today to bring two really rad cattlemen that I respect a lot together for a conversation around hay. When Katie and I kind of first started thinking about the concept for this webinar, we were talking about really trying to um, share ideas about bale grazing and supplemental feeding strategies. And the more we got into that, we were kind of like, well, what even is bale grazing? And what exactly do we mean by that? And the more we talked to both Cameron and Brian, I think the more we realized that there was so much more to kind of the world of supplemental feed in terms of how to use that, both how to make it like work financially for your business and then also um, how to get creative around using that as a tool for remediation. So, uh, I'm gonna read short little bios about these guys, and then I'm gonna let them talk more about themselves. Um, but we have with us Cameron King. Cameron is a rancher and farmer based in Malin, Oregon, where he manages King farm land and cattle. Marine Corps veteran, Cameron returned to expand his family hay and cattle operation and now manages over 3,000 acres and 500 cow-calf pairs. In recent years, he's embraced holistic management practices, eliminating synthetic inputs and proving that hay production and regenerative grazing can go hand in hand, even under the challenges of drought. And honestly, it's been really cool to get to know Cameron over this last year and see how some of the changes he's made have played out in real time. Um, and I'm excited for him to share more about that. And in this corner, we have Brian Alexander. Brian, also, you may know him as Red Hills Rancher. He runs a 7,000-acre native grass ranch in southwest Kansas. With over 17 years of regenerative ranching experience, Brian blends traditional grazing with ecological restoration. You may have also heard his podcast, Ranching Reboot, which I believe is on hiatus, maybe permanently. Um, Permanentishly, at least hiatus. We'll just leave it at hiatus. But if you go back and listen to the back catalog of that podcast, there are some really incredible episodes, interviews with fascinating people, such as myself and others. Uh, and with that, I would love to just maybe let each of you guys talk a little bit about your operations and yourselves, and if there's anything I missed in the bio you want to share. Um, and then maybe you can each talk a little bit about just what supplemental feeding looks like in your context. And I'm going to start with you, Cameron.
Okay. Well, to add to the bio piece, one of our niche market things is that we do some seed stock Angus production. So that's one of my passions, and I really enjoy that. And we've been fairly successful at that. And so we're continuing to move that forward. But basically for 30 years we were predominantly a hay production outfit, a commercial. We did things the conventional farming way. More inputs and more production meant to more profitability. And basically in the last 3 years we saw that between drought and the hay market, without we had to make a change financially. And so last year was that big transition period. We had not, we haven't put inputs on in 2 years, but last year's we decided to make the decision to not irrigate any of our hay ground. And so that was a big move, uh, being 1,200 acres of alfalfa, and we didn't irrigate a single acre. Instead, we sold the water, and that ended up actually working out better for us financially for the year. And never been done before completely like that, in this area. And then I was told by several people that our crops would fail, they would die, and not last till this upcoming year. They would not come back. So, anyways, we went through last year. It wasn't that much of a struggle. Production was above what we had actually anticipated with no irrigation. Hay quality was higher, and so yeah, there was lots of benefits to what we did last year. And so we just, yeah, it was a game changer for us. And then it really set a ground level deal where we know what we can do in that type of situation again. And so that gives us comfort knowing next time they call the water or we lose the ability to irrigate, we know what we can predict kind of as far as production goes and put that into our bottom line. So, yeah, and then basically the things that we've been practicing are in relationship to this webinar is just doing a little different. I won't say different method to the way people have fed cattle around here in the winter in the past or use them to graze off fields, but it's just that we're being more precise about it. The way we feed our hay in the winter time now is about placing that hay in a certain area for a certain reason. And so we can get more into that later, but it's just about keeping track of it all and seeing that we can benefit if we pay attention to what we're doing on a daily basis. So
Yeah, great. I cannot wait to hear more about the how you're managing the minutia of all of that. Brian, I'm going to kick it over to you. What did I miss in your bio? And tell me a little bit more about your place in the Red Hills.
Oh, I mean, I think the bio kind of hit it. I'm pretty sure that's just about what I wrote anyway, or what Grok and I came up with. Um, so my operation for the context is, in the context of this discussion, you know, like you said at the beginning, we had several conversations about bale grazing. What is bale grazing? And let's just kind of nail down some terminology here. And it turns into a big can of worms of a whole slew of different techniques and reasons of why you would choose to employ a quote bale grazing technique. In my context, for my operation, I'm custom grazing. I did have my own herd of cows that were here 365 days a year, but primarily I'm a growing season custom grazing operation. And my forage availability started about 2 weeks ago and I'll get a lot of cool season grass. And then that just kind of starts fading into warm season grass. And by July 15th, my warm season grass kind of shuts off and my protein starts to go down. We'll get another bump of protein in the forage in the fall from the cool season grasses. But for most of the year, at least 6 months of the year, my grass is very protein deficient. So I would bring in alfalfa to feed my cows over the winter to give them that extra protein, and they could utilize some dry grass. When it got real cold, I'd throw out a protein tub as well, like a 20% protein tub with as high fat content as I could find. Um, I think it's important to say something about bale grazing in the context of supplement feeding versus substitute feeding. And I prefer to feed in a context where I'm supplementing the animals, I'm supplementing what's out in the pasture versus a substitute feed where you're hauling 100% of, hauling 50 to 100% of the animal's feed needs for the day to them. That's something else. So the bale grazing that I've been doing lately, I have a rock quarry on the north end of my property, and they're starting to reclaim a previous cut. So they start that off, they fill it full of the old overburden, and they put topsoil on it. That got done in a place last summer. So late last fall, I went up and I spread some prairie hay out that had been harvested from like just not even a quarter mile away, the other side of the quarry, a couple years before. Spread that out, and fortunately, we got about 2 inches of rain the day that I put the cattle in there. The cattle did a pretty good job of stomping that material into the ground. So since we last talked, Beth and Katie, I went back out and I had a long conversation with the quarry manager. And he says, yeah, well, we ran out of topsoil on that south part, and we're going to start stripping this new cut. We're going to bring over some more dirt, bring that up, and put topsoil back on. Oh, okay, cool. That's why we couldn't get anything to grow on the very top, but the side slopes are starting to grow some nice grass. The very top of it, not so much. And before I talked to him last week, I was out there, just after I got back from Italy, looking at it, taking some pictures, and it just started to green up. And the top, so it's an area on top of a hill, and I took some of those prairie hay bales up there and I just unrolled them. It was just all that was left. They didn't unroll well. Did the best I could. Cattle came in, stomped it down. So I'm up there, things should be growing. There's nothing growing on this very top, but I can see it's still really pugged up. Like a lot of people call it pugged up and nasty. To me, those are just little ponds. The cow hoof makes a little pond and a little dam to slow water down and to catch water and help it infiltrate. So pretty hopeful. Got to keep monitoring that experiment as it goes by. This is the first time I've really tried to do this on a piece of reclaimed ground, and hopefully this quarry keeps going, and I'll have the opportunity to do this over and over and over and over.
Yeah, I think something that's interesting about that project, Brian, is that I mean, when you're doing reclamation of a mine, that's really almost like more similar to reclaiming like farm ground that's been chemically abused for a long time, rather than like a piece of range ground that maybe has an established seed bank in it, or kind of has some level of ecosystem function. This ground has basically been raised and then just had new dirt shoved out there. So could you tell me a little more about, yeah, just like the prairie hay and maybe what the components are of in that? Why did you choose prairie hay versus any other type of hay to feed out there? Or were you even trying to feed it? Was it about getting it on the ground more than anything?
It was the reason we had the prairie hay cut originally is I wanted a stockpile in case it was just a stockpile of forage, just something that was brown that I could throw out there for the cows to eat and put a little protein with if ground was completely covered. So that was part of the initial strategy. And it's always been, part of the discussions while we've been developing this quarry of how we're going to reclaim it. And, there's part of it that I've got to have cattle excluded from the whole thing, right? So I've got grass up there, these pockets on top of the hills that the cattle can't really, I can't graze because it's, you know, every day there's 10 or 30 trucks plus machinery running around. What are we going to do with it? Well, my quarry manager he makes hay as a side business. So, hey, we'll just cut a little bit of that. We did it on shares. So I had some left over. And it was also kind of in the back of my mind that we would use some of that prairie hay as ground cover when we're going back on reclaiming sites. So that kind of was always in the back of my head. Now, to kind of back up a little bit, the topsoil mostly got spread on the sides of the hill, which I'm okay with. I'd much rather have the sides of my hill, have that good topsoil in it that has a seed bank in it that can get something started immediately rather than trying to, put the topsoil on top and then try to get something established on the sides and get the sides growing, get a root in there to hold it. Because where we are, any slope over 3% is going to erode. Like everything here is highly erodible. I know y'all out there in the Palouse, you farm some stuff like on a 45-degree angle. If we tried that here, I mean, all your dirt would be in the bottom of the canyon. Like that doesn't work here. There are fields here where guys have terraces 20 feet apart. It's that
Hmm.
steep and that erodible. Like, yeah, you really got to really, you have to really want to farm that piece if you're restricted to a 20-foot tool to fit in between the terraces. Anyway, um, yeah, I think that was it.
Yeah. Uh, okay, Cameron, I want to throw it back over to you. I know you have a lot of moving pieces going. You have both a hay operation and a cattle operation, and I know a big part of like the changes you've actually made are kind of tied into your holistic financial planning process. And that makes sense because, I mean, for me as a cattle producer, feed is my number one expense and always the thing I'm kind of obsessed with figuring out how to knock down. So I'm wondering if you could speak maybe a little to just like how are you handling all of those moving pieces and give me a little picture into how they all fit together.
Oh, well, it's complex. uh, well, when we were doing just straight hay, um, we were maximizing our tonnage, right, every year and really pushing that crop to, I mean, we're just maximizing our tonnage every year and then taking as many cuttings as we could on straight alfalfa. And what I noticed over the years of doing that is that like a plant like alfalfa has a lifespan. Um, it's like we kind of got it down to like, hey, it has 32 cuttings in its lifetime, where it's going to produce X amount of tons, and not start depleting. But what we started noticing is that if we leave that fourth cutting alone, sometimes we get a fourth cutting here, that would allow that plant to store that energy in the root system and then bounce back earlier and better that following spring. So then you deal with residual on top of the ground. Well, lots of guys would go in and mechanized chop it so it's not tall, so it wouldn't fold over. Then you're dealing with a rodent population that's coming in, and so that was always these are always fear factors, right? That we're playing into why we got to take that last cutting of hay off, why we got to poison rodents, why we have to chop that, take in a mechanized piece of machinery and chop out down that residual. Well, what we're finding now is with the cattle, and it's just benefit for the cattle, benefit for the ground, benefit for everybody. It saves on fuel. So we're just like now we will not take a fourth cutting. It does not matter whether or not the market's good, whether it's bad, or we got a really high quality product out there that we think we could sell. We know we're going to get more benefit out of it by leaving that residual, letting that plant store that energy, and then using the cows that now they can go out there and use it as a feed source, while putting, biology and nitrogen and everything back into the soil. So, but before that, we had not made that part of our process. It was like, okay, well, sometimes it works, sometimes it didn't. Now we know that that has to be part of our process because the benefit of it outweighs what we can get from it. And it just, once you factored in the cost of our fuel and our labor and everything, putting that machinery out there to harvest maybe sometimes half to a 3/4 ton crop of alfalfa, man, you start running the real numbers and you're like, yeah, well, it was really high quality, but it just wasn't paying the bills. The margin was pretty small. And so now we're seeing more benefit. It's just finding like that was one of the ways we saw like we don't have to put as much pressure on ourselves towards the end of the fall to get that crop up with bad weather coming in. And then we don't have to start feeding hay as early in the wintertime because we're going to put the cows out and get them grazing those fields. So it just, we had to find those things that worked really well together and go against the grain a little bit because not everybody does it. And I will say this, lots of people graze alfalfa in the fall, but they don't plan it as part of we need to do it on every single field. It's just when they couldn't get the crop put up. But what we're doing that differently. We are absolutely planning on putting a cow on every acre of our hay ground every
Right.
fall.
As part of your soil maintenance, essentially.
Exactly. But what we're also doing is we did that in the style last year in an amp grazing style where we did not, even though the plants were dormant, we saw that we could have those animals trampling the crowns and things like that that plant needs in the early spring to start going. And so we basically moved them every day. And that's why I really think why we're seeing so much more health out of our plants this spring as to other springs we've had because we did that differently than we have in the past. In the past, we used to just let them have the whole field. And I think just over trampling of those crowns broke them down too much. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, I know, I think the temptation is always to like chase yield, chase that top dollar
mhm.
figure. And I think what's been really cool about what you've done, Cameron, is that you've used the holistic financial planning to actually analyze those different enterprises and figure out like there's always this question, right, of how do you balance nutritional needs, feed costs, ecological goals, and it always feels like
Mhm.
it's kind of this amorphous competing interest sort of thing. And and I've just been really inspired by how you've actually used the tool of the holistic financial planning to really drill down and figure out how to optimize each of those enterprises so that they all work together, and actually put some numbers to something that I think feels really amorphous to a lot of people. And I think it's also kind of what has allowed, I think, tell me if I'm wrong. I think this is kind of what it's allowed you to make some of these scary leaps in terms of letting go of inputs or letting go of water, because you have crunched the numbers on what the outcomes of that are going to be. It's not just like a leap of faith.
Yeah, well, it is. Last year when we were entering into our farming year, we were right at that critical point of deciding whether or not we needed to fertilize or not, on just some of our ground. But it was like, what do we do? And we just ran the numbers through the holistic deal, and where we really saw the impact for us to make the decision was the return to overhead. Um, we saw that based on our last year's number, even with the higher hay market, our cattle enterprise was returning 25% more to our overhead than our hay enterprise was. And so that was, whoa, like, why would we be putting inputs into something that's already not returning more to overhead, um, right off the bat? And so then we started chipping away at, take that 200,000. Our fertilizer bill was well over $200,000 a year in the past. So we took that off, and immediately we were like, wow, we're really close to profitability this year. Um, take the spray out that we had used to just like the pre-emergent spray so we could get a high quality first cutting. Took that out. All of a sudden, wow, we're like right on the cusp of being profitable. And so then it just became like, what don't we have to have? And then the water. What we had $100,000 water bill, or I mean power bill in recent years leading up to this, and then power rates here in the Northwest are increasing. So we just said, if we don't irrigate, what's the worst that could happen? And we played that out, like figuring that we could probably get 3 tons to the acre on all of our alfalfa ground. And when we played that out with minimum price on those 3 tons per acre, we were profitable as long as we didn't add in that power cost. And so I had a leap of faith, and I thought this alfalfa is going to survive. It's built to survive with a deep tap root, and that's going to happen. It was a I won't say it was a big risk. We just knew what we were doing. If we go under in last year's situation, then how would we even go forward from here? So that those pieces made us allow us to make the change, and then with last year we ended up at a 4 ton per acre average. So that was on, nobody thought it was possible. And then what we saw effects from that was, one, with the plant being stressed slightly and having to reach deeper, we saw higher test quality. TDN was up. By not irrigating, we didn't have to move our hay out of the field. We just left it in the field and had it shipped directly out of the field. Saved us almost $10 to $15 in cost, but from barn storing it. So these little pieces, and then we moved it fast, so our cash flow was better. I mean, it just expounded one after another. Things, benefits came from it. And right now, because we can't sell our water this year, because it's not a drought year, we've had this insane snow this winter and everything. We had to change 180. Now we have to produce more hay because we've got to be able to make up that margin, without that money coming in from the water enterprise. So again, we're just like, okay, how do we do this? And we just plugged it all back into the deal. And hey, it tells us this is how much hay we have to produce this year. So we're going to try and produce that much. And our hay enterprise is due to return about 25% more than it was in the past 2 years to our overhead this year. But our cattle enterprise is going to stay the same. So, yeah, I mean, it's a great tool, and it really gave us the freedom to figure out where we needed to head. from here on out. So
Yeah, appreciate that. As someone who like I'm all about the grazing plan and I get really down in the weeds and that I appreciate being reminded that like there's so much impact you can actually make from crunching the numbers. Brian, tell me a little bit about how you're balancing all these competing factors of nutritional needs of the livestock, feed costs, and I know you're also really passionate about the ecology piece of it.
Well, I'm not sure how to answer that. I mean, I manage for the ecology first, the birds, the beavers, um, birds, beavers, pollinators, and managing for performance and animal welfare. I hate to say it, but it almost kind of comes secondary. You take care of you take care of your soils, you take care of your plants. That takes care of all the other, above ground, below ground life. You take care of that biology, the biology takes care of your cows. Um, the 4 years that I had my cows, none of them we didn't have to spray any of them, didn't have to do any fly control. The only fly control we did, the only disease control we really did was mineral water. Just made sure we had, really concentrated salt water out for them to drink late May, early June, and never had a problem with hooves, never had a problem with eyes, never had a problem with flies. Other herds of cattle on the ranch that, I don't really necessarily have the power to make all the management decisions on. Um, you know, I have one client, he likes to make sure everything's got fly dope on it. Whenever he puts them in a trailer or whenever they come off a trailer, he's spraying them with, Saber or cleanup or Sidectin or whatever. And it never fails. About mid-June, his cows will be covered in flies. Kind of makes sense sometimes. So I try to promote, a lot more holistic way of thinking. We need to be thinking about the soils, and everything we do to our cattle affects the soil, and everything we do to our soil affects the cows. Um, Mostly just trying to close the loop. Um, hopefully we're breeding cows that are more hardy and more efficient on forage instead of just things that want to stand in a feedlot and eat corn all day. That wasn't what you asked.
No, that's okay though. But tell me more about how your supplemental feed kind of plays into all that. Like how are you using your supplemental feeding to support soil ecology and kind of build that from the ground up?
Okay, so the limited bit of feeding that I did do, like I said, I'd purchase alfalfa on the open market because I didn't really have a good source, and I was trying to build a relationship with a supplier. Um, and feeding alfalfa as a protein supplement in the wintertime when it's under $200 a ton, that's not a bad thing. When it goes to like $440 a ton, that becomes a little less practical of a situation. And when I would unroll a bale, I would always try to have a spot in mind, like, okay, maybe if I get it down here in this kind of sub-irrigated bottom, there's any seeds in it, maybe I'll have a little stand of alfalfa here next year. Maybe not. I would always try to put it somewhere where either I wanted the animals to go impact or where I thought that any seeds that were in the alfalfa might have a chance to live and grow. So that was kind of some of my strategy. Um, moving into the future, I'm trying my overall grazing strategy is to try to increase the amount of warm season grass that I have as far as the overall forage mix in a pasture. They're more tolerant, they're more heat tolerant. They don't quite put as much weight on the cattle, but the volume of the grass makes up for it. And that kind of fits into, overall holistically, I feel that, we've so far degraded the environment that our pattern here in the Central Great Plains is going to be towards warmer and drier. So I'm trying to manage my ranch and shift the plant community to be more tolerant of a warmer, drier climate.
Hmm.
I
I
don't think
see you
I've ever
not.
really said that like big picture wise, but there it is.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's fast. I'm definitely noticing the same things here in the Northwest, so I don't think that that's exclusive to out there. Cameron, I see you kind of nodding around along. Are you thinking about warm season grasses and or warm season crops in the mix of what you do?
Well, we don't have any warm season grasses. You know, when we've done our ecolog or our EOV monitoring, we just haven't seen anything here. And I mean, it's not they wouldn't historically be here because of the short window and the late frost and early frost in the fall. But it is. I mean, the trend is that we're moving towards warmer every summer and we're seeing these hotter spells. And so that makes me think that, well, we just got to try them. Nobody's really been trying to plant any warm season stuff into their mixes or anything like that. So yeah, it's part on my radar to start exploring that, you know, and getting those things, or at least trying them out and see what works or doesn't work in the next couple of years, because I think that's where we're headed. So, yeah.
Yeah, Brian, you mentioned that you're very strategic about where you're feeding your hay and really looking at that as a way to cover soil or like increase animal impact. I know, Cameron, you've also mentioned that that's something you're thinking about a lot. You have also done some really interesting experiments where you have not cut hay, like not baled the hay and just cut it and left it in place. I'm wondering if you could tell
Yeah.
me a little bit about what you've noticed between like straight up grazing versus swathing it and leaving it in place versus baling it up.
Um, so that was, I mean, we just did a kind of had a little fun last summer because we had a field that we fall planted into a wheat crop. I germinated great in the fall, and so I was like, well, let's see what grazing cattle on this starting in the springtime looks like. And then we had some of the crop get ahead of the cows to the point where I knew if they were going to graze it between it would cause eye problems or it was just going to be too tall and too mature that they wouldn't really want to forage on it. So we made the decision to cut some of it or cut the whole rest of the field, but we left a bunch of it in windrows in the field. And then we baled up some of it. So we just kind of made a big experimental plot. Well, I don't know, Katie, if you want to pull up that picture. I don't know if you want to. What we did is in one area we grazed the cattle, and so that crop, um, they grazed off the what was growing, and then it didn't really mature enough to have a seed head come back after they went through. If that makes sense. But then the next stage, the grain crop had matured, had grain in the head, so it had a seed, and then we laid it down um, in a windrow style, like we were gonna go and bale it, but we left it, and then we had the cows go in and graze it. It's like it would be like bale grazing, except without having it in a bale form. It was just in the windrow prior to that. So if you're looking at that picture that Katie's sharing, basically the side that I'm standing on, you can almost see kind of strips to your right, to my on the right hand of the picture. Those would be where the windrows were. And so the benefit we got from the side that we didn't windrow is that we had animal impact, but we didn't have the seed get knocked out of the feed, and then the cows didn't have any dry feed. But what we're seeing is that maybe our best plan going forward when we have a field like this is to lay it out in a windrow. We get the animal impact benefit. We get, you know, them coming over the top. But that right there, all that deep dark green is not planted, is not tilled. That was animal impact replanting that crop. And
Sorry, I don't think we can see the picture, Katie, or I can't.
oh,
Brian, you can't see it either.
Oh, I can see it.
Oh, maybe it's probably because I have too many monitors going outside.
if everybody, anyway, so that deep dark green, um, I don't see Tom says he can see it too. Okay.
It's a me
But
problem. Keep going.
that deep dark green, that is those cows had feed in front of them. They were cleaning up that. They were incorporating a lot more litter and then knocking that seed out of that stalk down to the ground and then putting it in. And that's what it looks like this spring without any irrigation last summer. They did that in like mid-July. They knocked that seed out of the head, put it in the dirt, and then this is what it looks like coming up the next spring. So it's just like, wow, if we can get away with not having to plant, plus the cows have a feed source, and if we can do it going into the fall, we're going to get a heck of a lot more benefit out of doing it that way. Which, just if we were thinking about, regenerative stuff, well, maybe why would we run a mechanized piece of equipment out there? Well, it's like maybe we shouldn't, but in this case, I'm seeing really, really high benefit from doing it. So that's a plan of ours. We're going to do it on a whole field this year, planning to go in and fall and winter graze it just that same exact way. And then we're going to do our other ones a little bit different, but that's, yeah. So we're just, and then we had back there, if you look behind me in that picture, there's a metal piece. I wish I had another picture, but behind that, we actually never even harvested the crop. We never we didn't do anything to it, and we never ran animals on it. So we had another little like 3 acre plot there where we saw what the effects are. And there was nothing growing this spring in that area. There was a lot of litter, but no new grain coming up, nothing. And so it was like, oh, wow, yeah, no duh. Animal impact is the key right there to making stuff grow. So it was another piece that just helped us, look at things from the past. Because lots of people would just sometimes now with the insurance game, with grain farming, people will leave a crop out there and let it go. But now we're thinking about, man, if we see a grain crop sitting there, maybe we'll just tell those guys, hey, we'll go in there and graze it off for you. And you might get some benefit, some fertilizer, this, we might get some feed, and it might even replant you some crop, at least if any nothing else to hold the soil together when those spring winds come through, rather than have them till it up and watch it blow. So
All right, we talked a little bit about the financial and ecological pieces. We haven't really touched on the social piece. I'm gonna throw it back to you first, Cameron. Does everyone think you're freaking crazy out there? What?
yeah.
How are the social implications of this going for you? Like all you've made.
Well, we thought there was some people who thought we would lose relationships because we don't have a fertilizer company we're working with anymore. That's not true. I mean, we haven't seen any issue from there. The biggest pushback we're getting, not pushback, but people going, why are you doing this? Why don't you just irrigate like last year? Was out of the irrigation district. And board members on the irrigation district offering to come in and tear my alfalfa out for me because it's going to die by next year, you know. So I went, no, it's not. Watch and see. And then, yeah, it didn't die. If anything, it looks better because we didn't harvest it as much. So it, I will just say that, well, I don't walk into as many certain rooms anymore because I know it's just, not conducive to our operation or my way of thinking because they're stuck in a rut. But trying to have the conversation with people. One thing I do know for a fact is that in the last 5 years, on two of our fields, totaling about 160 acres apiece, we have depleted. Well, I won't say depleted. I know we've depleted the organic matter in the soil, but we've seen a decrease in organic matter coming out of alfalfa to when we get done with a 4 year crop rotation, which includes 2 grain crops and 2 row crops. The organic matter is down 4% in those fields over a 4 year period. So I think when we put alfalfa back in because of its nitrogen fixing capabilities and things like that, it has the opportunity to build some of that back, but it's not taking it off. Anyways, it's just these guys are wondering why we're going to graze cows on alfalfa this year. And I'm like, well, because one, the price of alfalfa doesn't hold up, and I think I can put more pounds on calves by having them graze it, and they'll be healthier. But they're just, yeah, they just think it's nuts. And I've tried having the conversation with a few people about how we're depleting the organic matter, and they're wondering why we're irrigating alfalfa. There's people irrigating alfalfa right now after we had 3 feet of snow on the fields. And 25, 30 years ago, that would not have been the case. We wouldn't be irrigating till, mid to late May, if that. And I think it directly correlates with our organic matter because of the water storage capability in the soil. So, but again, to your thing, sorry, I got off a little bit, but the social piece is that there's just a lot of old boys and they're not willing to listen. And our basin is seeing just more and more. The 500-acre guys are getting wiped out. And it's now, 10 years ago, we had one 10,000-acre corporate farm. And now we have like 3 or 4. And we had probably, 10 to 15 more guys who were 500-acre guys, and they're done. Or they're working for the big guys and sold them their farm. And so it just sucks. Sorry, but that these guys, I wish some of these guys, I would have stumbled upon holistic management and regenerative stuff earlier, so we could have started, having it be a visual for people to see what's happening. But all we can do is move forward, and maybe some of these guys can switch quick enough to not lose their 1,000 or 1,500-acre farms, because there's a lot of those guys that it's coming. They're half hay acres, and it's coming in the next year or two if the hay market doesn't go up. But even if it does, the inputs alone are going to bleed them dry. So,
I'm going to ask you the same question in a second, but we are in the Q&A portion of the hour. So if anyone in the audience has questions, please pop them in the chat and we will get those to Brian and Cameron as well. Brian, you're a little further in your regenerative ag journey. I'm curious just how the social piece of it is for you.
Well, I've been doing it long enough. All my neighbors know that I'm weird. So I don't quite get so many of the strange stares at the feed store or the coffee shop anymore.
It's just a gift.
It's just a gimme now. I remember when I had 4 or 5 years ago when I was starting a strip grazing experiment, just see if it'd work on native range, and I had all these Coriander cows jammed in at 50,000 pounds per acre. I mean, that's 55,000 pounds an acre for a daily move. That's pretty decent stock density. The neighbors went nuts. Oh, that'll never work. You can't do that. Those cows will never stay in. They're going to lose so much weight. That pasture will never be the same. You're right. That pasture never was the same. It got better. Cows didn't die. I had way over a 90% preg rate. Something must have worked. So the same people 5 years ago were looking at me strip grazing and being very negative on it. Now they're going, maybe there is something to this whole stock density thing that he keeps mumbling about all the time. Maybe there is something to this rotation grazing and rest periods that he mumbles about all the time. Like, yeah, I've been trying to tell you guys. And sometimes you just have to make a spectacle next to the highway to get people talking. And the way I look at it, if you've got people that are kind of behind your back talking about what you're doing, that's not a bad thing. I learned this when I was doing a podcast. Like, I would much rather have 5 haters than 5 fans, because you got to work to keep those fans. You got to work to keep them in line. You got to work to keep them interested. The haters follow you around, watch all your shit, and you get to live rent free in their head and you don't have to work for it. So they're the best kind of people to have around. So if you've got people that are really questioning what you're doing, keep doing it and make them ask those questions, because you're living rent free in their head. And what you're doing is living rent free in their head, and they're thinking about it. They might not agree with it, but you're up there.
I appreciate that advice a lot, Brian. We got a question, which I think is actually going to open a whole rabbit hole of questions. How hard it is how hard is it to start a hay field from scratch? And then my second question is that I'm going to add on is, what is a hay field?
I want to go first, and then I'll shut up and Cameron can have all that. How hard is it to start a hayfield from scratch? Why do you want to break out perfectly good grassland to grow hay? That would be my first question. You know, what are we breaking out to start a hayfield? Usually, in my mind, hay is kind of like the end state for degraded cropland. Like, well, it can't grow wheat anymore. Definitely can't grow corn on it, so we might as well try to grow some feed.
Gotcha. So in my mind, hay is anything that you're gonna probably, harvest and bale up to use as supplementary or whatever feed for like a wintertime. So it could be grassland, it could be alfalfa. It really depends on what you're striving for as far as putting up hay. So but if we're talking about, let's say, just for alfalfa, a monocrop situation. Um, Normal practice is a ton of tillage, a ton of packing the soil and leveling the soil so that way your equipment's gonna have a really easy time and be smooth and not beat that stuff up. And then you end up with this super consistent crop, at least even across, 100-acre field or something like that. Um, with experiments I've done, not that hard. It's best to go in behind something where you have some residual, litter or something. We actually, before we quit doing inputs, but we would come in behind like a summer. We would harvest a grain hay crop off in the middle of the summer, and then we would airflow seed on, which, or you could do with a spinner spreader over the top, and then run something like a simple field harrow. You're not tilling the soil, but you're causing, surface impact, and you're getting that seed just, brushed up with dirt or into the, crowns of like stubble and things like that. And then you can come through and pack it with something like we used to use a crowfoot roller, kind of imitates almost a small sheep foot roller type of situation. Not a ton of weight, but it would just get it beat into the soil just enough. And but now I would say if you have access to animals, I would say if you have enough residual or a litter, standing litter, maybe stubble field or existing grass or something like that, and you want to add to that, um, you could airflow the seed or spinner spread the seed out there, maybe scratch it with a harrow just so you kind of break up that top layer of soil and get it in, and then run animals over the top and graze them over the top. If you could somehow do your supplemental feeding in the wintertime or in the fall or spring, it really doesn't matter, but and get another layer of litter on top of there to protect it from the frost when it wants to germinate, you'd probably have a really good successful deal. So
Yeah,
but it's as hard as you want to make it, I think, and it really depends on the results you're looking for. If you're really wanting a high germination rate and straight alfalfa, that's tougher. But if you're like, oh no, I'm okay with spreading some seed and getting just stuff to fill in the gaps, then yeah, I don't see why it wouldn't be too. It can be pretty easy.
yeah, of course the classic answer, it depends. But I think yeah, to your point, that's kind of why I asked the question of what is a hayfield? Because I've heard Brian talk about his prairie hay that has like plum trees baled up in it and stuff. You know, I mean, if you can run a baler out there, I guess you can make hay somehow. But I think thinking about how do we do that again in the most optimal way, not necessarily is it about maximizing yield, but maximizing just like optimizing um all of those things, and it really starts at the soil surface. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Oh, Brian.
I just one final observation. Um, So it was 2020. It was late 2020, like August, when we cut the prairie hay. And just now this year, I'm finally starting to see it to where I would say it's recovered enough that it can be cut again. So it's taken 4 years for the prairie to recover from, essentially a severe defoliation without animal impact or fire.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting insight. Appreciate that. Uh, well, anything any of y'all want to say before we part ways? Pearls of wisdom? How can people get in touch with you if they want to or find out about you?
Redhillsrancher.com. Use the contact form, or you can email me at redhillsrancher@gmail.com.
Sweet.
I'll just put mine in the deal, my email, Beth.
In case
And
anybody
that
wants
way,
to buy some hay or some really nice Black Angus bulls. I actually need to talk.
there you go. Black Angus bone. There you go. Yeah. I don't have, I mean, I just say if anybody's on their path with holistic management, it's just, you know, it really depends on your holistic context. If people haven't gone through that exercise, right? That's where you start. And for us, like Brian brought up a good point earlier, where like he's really like his goal is the soil first, and then it will feed us. And I think, and like in our case, we're just in a different stage of that. We want that. But right now, what we had to do to focus on keeping our business even floating was how do we, focus on that profit side of it so we can start to implement more of those practices that we want to do. And so people got to be really, focus on what your holistic context is. If it's, hey, I want to be profitable, kind of as your first leg, mixed with I want to regenerate the soil. Okay, what comes first? Make sure that prioritizes. And I think, like, see, we're going to try and do those things along the way, and we got to just keep making sure we're profitable enough to have the employees that we have and do the things we need to do. And in 2 years, what we're hoping is like that's not the case. Now we just strictly focus on soil health and our animal health and all those pieces, and then we get to kind of be profitable as a byproduct of that, and not focus on it so heavily on a day-to-day basis. So, anyways, I think people, if they haven't done a holistic context, that's a big one. If for nothing else other than just improving quality of life. So.
Yeah, really, really appreciate that, Cameron. Cameron, Brian, thank you both so much. I honestly could spend all day chatting with y'all. Just two of my favorite guys and some really, really savvy operators. So appreciate your time and your knowledge. And the recording of this will be up on our YouTube channel, so you can catch it there if you didn't make it live.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, Katie, hit stop record. So before I cut, I made it the whole hour.